And now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Gil Penalosa. He is the founder and chair of 880s City, and he has been a guidance and an inspiration into my work. Gil, over to you.
Mike, thank you very much. Obviously, the statistic that you mentioned about the deaths and injuries and having the worst in all of North Carolina is something that doesn't make any sense, and that it can change and it can be safe and it's doable. And I want to talk a little bit about that, but I want to share my screen first. Okay, do you see now the screen?
Yep, you got it.
Okay, thank you. When I participated in the first session of Livable Appalachia, we spoke about how COVID-19 arrived and people said all changed, but I think that nothing really has changed. Our perception changed. It was like if we had been given some magnifying glasses to look at our cities, and we saw these issues of equity with all of the hotels empty and people were sleeping on the parking lots. But also we saw when it was lockdown and there were fewer cars, how the quality of the air became cleaner. It was evident. If people had not seen it before, now they saw, and it was all over the world, whether it was in India or Italy or the US or anywhere, we saw what happened. We have seen what is possible. We have seen what is possible. And also we know that if we go back to 2019, it's gonna be killing millions of children. I don't say it, the World Health Organization says over 600,000 children die every year because of polluted air. So we need to decide, how do we wanna live? And I think that the post-COVID has to be around health, equity, sustainability. So how do you want communities in Appalachia to become? I think the goal has to be having equitable and sustainable communities where all people, regardless of age or background, will live healthier and happier. And from a horrible situation, also some opportunities came. They told us be active, but outside, and be physically separated. When there were not enough parks, people realized that the streets are public spaces. And in many areas like Oakland, California, in 24 hours, they shut down all of the neighborhood streets, all of them, only for people that live on the street. They call it slow streets, only at 10 miles an hour. And with fewer cars, people came out to play and enjoy, little children, people with disabilities, cleaner air, less noise, safe. And with fewer cars also, communities around the world, they started doing protected bikeways, things that used to take decades, years, all of a sudden in just weeks or days, people were doing citywide networks, connectivity of protected bikeways. And so we saw that it's doable, that it was not really a financial issue or a technical issue, but that it could be done, or dedicated bus-only lanes, or having markets on the streets, or even turning golf courses that are used for 200 people into public parks used by thousands and thousands of people. So it seems like the impossible had become possible. And people were happy and they saw the opportunity. Maybe we're gonna be able to use some roads and make them into linear parks with trees and benches, and it seems so easy. But unfortunately, it's not that easy, because there's other people that want to be more isolated, more car-oriented. So we need to decide, how do we want to live? And livable communities will help us live longer, happier, healthier. How is it? Part of it is the 8 domains. And it's, let me remind you, the well-being. The well-being, I mentioned 5 actions to well-being. Eat more plant-based, less meat. Number 2, we need to sleep 7 to 9 hours every day. Older adults also need to sleep 7 to 9 hours. Otherwise, that's why the memory doesn't work, is if we sleep less than 7 hours. We need to socialize. We need to have contact with nature. And by the way, having contact with nature, I invite everybody. Every other week, we have a webinar, a walk in the park with Gil, that is about being in nature. You can find all the information in gpenalosa.ca. And 5, we need to be physically active. Always, since the day we are born to the day we die, we need to be active, because being active decreases premature death, strokes, many cancers, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and older adults. It's only 30 minutes a day, but it has to be 5 or more days a week. It's not about doing marathons, it's only 30 minutes. So there's an urgency to be physically active. There is no magic pill. The only way that the communities in Appalachia are gonna have people being physically active, large groups of being physically active, is if we walk or bike or play, but as a normal part of everyday life. A normal part of everyday life, walking on the streets, on the parks, on the trails. So that's why today we're talking about mobility, and I'm focusing on sustainable mobility. And sustainable mobility is walking, but it's also riding bicycles, using public transit, new uses of cars. In the US, almost everybody wants to age in place. Almost 9 out of 10 people surveyed by AARP says they want to age in place. And part of aging in place is mobility. Let's keep in mind that even the people that are driving cars, men outlive by more than 10 years the possibility of drive cars, and women by more than 13 years. So it's not just about driving cars, it's walking, riding bicycles, using transit, new uses of cars. Let's talk about walking. But by the way, walking and cycling is not a joke. Mike just mentioned some numbers, it's not a joke. This could be any community in the Appalachia region. Walking and cycling is not a frivolity. I mean, this little girl knows it. And walking and cycling are the only individual mode of mobility for most people. It's the only individual mode of mobility for all children and youth. If you're under 16, your only individual mode of mobility is to walk or to bike. So being safe and enjoyable should be almost like a human right, unless you think that only the people that can drive and have the money and the desire to have a car have the right to individual mobility. That's how we're also talking about democracy and human rights and equality and sustainability, because everything is really linked to everything. So today, during this session on mobility, let's think, how do we want to live? Because, for example, if we want children to walk to school, we need to do small schools so that the catchment area is small. If we do gigantic elementary schools, are going to be drive schools. Let's keep in mind that every single trip begins and ends walking. That's how people were created. Just like the birds fly or the whales swim. People, we walk. And we walk even in the middle of the winter, we walk, and maybe we're so happy walking because we use all our senses. We're walking and we see children playing, we hear the birds singing. We go from a coffee shop and we smell the aroma. Parents and children walk, older adults walk, everybody walks. People, human beings walk in the winter, in the summer, but we need to make it safe. And we just saw data that shows that it's not safe in the Appalachia region. This is not safe. So first, we need to make all streets, except the arterials, except the large streets, all others have to be 20 miles an hour maximum. Why 20 miles? Let's keep in mind, older adults, we decrease the sight, the hearing, the walking speed, the concentration. Also, we go with grandchildren or great-grandchildren to the parks. We have mobility aids. So we need this to be safe. We need to think of everybody when we are setting speeds. By the way, why 20? It's not because it sounds nice, 20 is plenty. It's because if you get hit by a driver at 20 miles an hour, 5% probability of being killed. At 40 miles an hour is more than 80% probability of being killed. So if we want streets to be safe, we need to lower the speeds everywhere. It's just a matter of life or death. These are not technical issues. We know what needs to be done. We need to do it. We need to implement it. For example, if we have a small island on the crosswalks, we eliminate more than half of the incidents. Why are we still doing crosswalks and we don't put an island in the middle? The children are on a field trip, not all of them crossing one light, so half of them stayed for the next light, and it's safe for everybody. And by the way, the segment of the population that gets killed, also children and babies and men, but it's older adults. It's the highest segment of the population killed in intersections. We need to develop an attitude of people first. And people first is doable regardless of the incomes of the place. But it's not people first when we split up the communities like this. It's not people first when we do sidewalks that look like a roller coaster. I mean, it's nice that in this community they put lights on the sidewalks, but it's not nice that they put the posts on the middle of the sidewalk. I mean, imagine on a wheelchair with a walker, or people that do this brand new sidewalk. When I visited this community 2 years ago, they had just finished these sidewalks and looks like a roller coaster. No, the car that is going in and out is the one that has to go up and down. The pedestrian should be perfectly flat. Even crossing the small streets, the sidewalk should continue and the cars turning. This is not people first. When we put posts on the middle of the sidewalk, or we invest in bridges, we say pedestrian bridges. No, that's not a pedestrian bridge. That's for the cars, so that the cars know. People want to walk at level. Maybe the dogs want to use that bridge. Sometimes we don't even do sidewalks. We're telling these people, you are a second-class citizen every single day when they don't even have sidewalks. I mean, sidewalks are so critical. By the way, when we're on the street, on the road, cycling in cars, in public transit, we go from point A to point B, not on sidewalk. On sidewalk, people meet boyfriends and girlfriends. We meet the neighbors, the people selling coffee and fruits. It's kind of their life. You go to any city, you leave the bags and you go out on the sidewalk. That is where you develop a sense of belonging. We use it in the summer, we use them in the winter. Children catch Pokemons on the sidewalks. We catch public transit on the sidewalk. The sidewalks are really critical, are kind of the life of the cities. And we do sales and markets and all kinds of activities. The sidewalks reminds us that walking is much more than walking. When I work in Buenos Aires, I see people dancing tango on the sidewalk. The sidewalks are almost part of the family of the parks. And of course, in the sidewalks, then we go to the parks, and then, but also there's public transit, and also we ride bicycle. Look at this bicycle, 3 generations on one bike. We can ride bicycles. This could be any community in the Appalachia region. This is how children could be going to school. And people of all ages, people can do it. Why is it that people bike in places like Copenhagen? Because it's safe, it's inexpensive, and it's connected. Connectivity is very, very critical. It snows, first they clean the sidewalk, then they bike with, then the sidewalk, then they bike with. The third time they do sidewalk, bikeway streets. It's about making it a priority. If we want people to walk or bike, we need to make it safe and enjoyable and inviting. Anybody, even in the middle of the winter, would ride their bikes or walk if this is what streets could look like. And this is what the urban areas of any of the communities in the Appalachia could look like. And but we need to make it safe. By the way, the weather in Copenhagen is horrible. It rains all year. It's cold in the winter, it's hot in the summer, but people of all ages, they bike. 41 out of 100 trips are done on a bicycle. And they're not happy with 41, they want to go to 50%. Men don't wear shirts in the summer. Women don't wear special shoes. It's great for everybody. But it's all of it physical separated. At one level for the cars, 3 inches higher for bikes, 3 inches higher for pedestrians. And they continue to improve their infrastructure year after year after year. Look at it, with all that ice and snow, and 16,000 cyclists had gone by when I took this photo. This is how people move in Copenhagen. Any community in the Appalachia region could think of something. This is an idea. By the way, working in Bainbridge in Washington, population 24,000. They said, okay, we want at least 25% of the people to walk or bike to their places by 2030. And at least 50% by 2045. So they have some of these goals. I mean, we need to go and see it. Working in Minneapolis, I went with their teams. Working in Oslo, this is the mayor of Oslo, by the way. The mayor of Oslo is very hilly, like many areas in the Appalachia region. So the mayor of Oslo gave me an e-bike, and she said, Gil, have you ridden an e-bike? I had not ridden an e-bike, so she said, be careful, because when you ride one, you won't get out of it. She has a beautiful e-bike that is electrically assisted bike, and it's very hilly. So she uses the e-bike, the electricity, to go up the hills, and then, but she pedals when it's flat or when it's coming down the hill. By the way, that younger woman is the deputy mayor for the environment, which is really interesting. But why is, how did the people in Copenhagen started biking? Because they went, the car was also taking over in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s. And then they went from a crisis. It's not because these bikings are different. In the oil crisis, people couldn't use their cars, except one day yes, one day no, and many children were being killed, and citizens were doing big demonstrations, and that's when they started building their network, and look what happened to the use. So we need to decide how do you want communities in Appalachia to become. And if we want to improve bikeability, anything that you do, anything, if it's not safe for an 80 and an 80, it's nothing. It's not. Don't even call it a bikeway. It's nothing. Always think of them, the children, the older adults. Maybe professionals riding in between trucks, but children do not bike in between trucks. So we need to think of people of all ages and abilities. Look, even with this kind of weather, what is it that people do in Copenhagen? When people say, oh, it's the weather. No, there is no such thing as bad weather. It's bad clothing. Look at that traffic jam on the right. Imagine that all of these people on bicycles, instead of using bicycles, were on cars. So this is completely doable. I mean, there are some things that are nice to have, but they don't get people cycling. Bicycle parking, maps, racks on the buses. That doesn't get, it makes it nicer for the 1 or 2% already cycling. I mean, think of someone that doesn't bike because they're afraid. It might be you, a family member. Would this person start biking if you do any of this? No. This is like getting the saddle before the horse. The only two things that would get more people cycling is if we lower the speed on the streets, and number two, if we develop a network of protected bikeways. So everything I said about 20 miles per hour for walking is also for cycling. But we need a network. We need connectivity of AAA. It's for all ages and abilities. It's not for the 20 to 15 spandex. It's for all ages and abilities. That's why we need to have connectivity. We need to think of daytime and nighttime. And if you don't want to do it permanent like these ones, don't just paint the lines. Enhance the painted line with bollards every 6 feet. And then it makes a world of difference. That's why people bike in Copenhagen, because there is connectivity. AAA bikeways, all ages and abilities. Keep that in mind. On rural roads, let's leave the space. Very important to leave enough space to make it safe. And also separate as well as possible. Please try to put some physical barrier so that in an emergency, a car can go there and stop, but the cyclists will be able to use it. So there are many ways. This is in Vitoria-Gasteiz when you're starting to go more into rural areas, and then you go even more, and then you make it. That's how to get people, is making safe infrastructure to walk and to bike. Some people say, oh, but the trails in the parks and the mountains, is it recreation or transportation? It's both. Sometimes we're going to use it for recreation. Sometimes we're going to use it for transportation. It is for both, but we need to have those trails interwoven into the city so that we can get from the city to the trail and the trail to the city walking or riding bicycles. It's not a drive to trail, but a ride bike to trail. And then it's going to make a world of difference. And this is about also having nature for all. And it's something that is really, really critical. We also need public transit. Keep in mind, civilized cities is not the one where the poor have cars. It's the one where the rich use public transit. We need, part of it is marketing, the name, the colors. A mayor said his people didn't like buses, so he put a nose, he covered the wheels, and now they look like trains. You know, this could be the buses in the Appalachian region. We need speed, frequency, connectivity. Frequency. Remember, physical space for public transit, you know, this is in big cities. You know, if you want one of these or 140 those, but we need public transit everywhere. Keep in mind, anyone under 16, they don't drive cars. Many older adults also don't drive cars, and many people do not want. This is also about the climate change and all of these things. Keep in mind, this is not a technical issue. We know the issue from climate change, walking and cycling is the best, also the lowest footprint. Also, we know the capacities. These are not technical or financial. This is political, but not from political parties. Every political party should be interested in having cleaner air. And obviously also cars. But keep in mind, cars, of course, cars will always have a role to play. But think from the cash flow, and we were talking about equity. 2-car households in the US, the cost of having a car is 20% of the income. This is according to the American Automobile Association. If people could downsize from 2 cars to 1, or from 1 to 0, it would be like winning the lottery. The cost to walk or bike or take public transit is only 4%. So you would have 16% more income if you could do it. Also from the capital point of view, that's cash flow. From the capital point of view, people do houses and they dedicate 20, 25% of the area of the house to the car, Is this how we should be spending the money? So from the point of view of equity, walking, cycling is really, really critical. Also communities, there's many people in the rural areas that go into the urban area to buy. Please develop campaigns such as park and walk, because people park in one place, they get their bread. They get on their car, the next block, they buy milk. The next block, they buy beer. No, park once and walk. Develop campaigns so that when people come into the commercial area, they only park once and then they walk. They're going to see a lot of different stores. They're going to see that there are wonderful coffee shops and so on. I just want to end by saying there's not going to be a Martian coming down to say, I will make livable Appalachia a place where everybody's going to move on sustainable mobility. Keep in mind, we need to plan and manage cities radically different. These are not technical issues. These are not financial. It's about policy, but not about political colors. It's about values. It's about principles. It's about how do we want the future. It's about the kind of legacy. Everybody needs to participate and engage the older adults, because the older adults are givers. They are not takers. Older adults are assets to our community. They are not liabilities. Older adults, we want to have a purpose in life. And part of the purpose is having healthier and happier community where there's equitable and sustainable. Older adults contribute to create livable communities. And if it's great for an older adult, it's going to be also good for everybody from 0 to over 100. So let's develop that shared vision and let's act. Action, action, action. And then we're going to be able to have equitable and sustainable communities where older people are going to live healthier and happier. So let's do it now. Thank you very much.
And
Gil,
Raphael, yep, you can bring Mike back in with Gil. Thanks.
Gil, thank you so much for that wonderful, fast-paced presentation. One of the things that came up in the chat during your presentation was you sort of touched on it at the end, but the bulk of your slides and the presentation was primarily about the urban core. And can you talk a little bit more about active transportation and transit in the outlining areas, in the rural areas, as that is a topic that was in the chat?
Is very, very critical to do also in the rural areas. Let's keep in mind that one of the biggest costs for anybody living in the urban area or in the rural area is mobility. When I was talking that people are spending 20% of their income on mobility, and if these low income people are spending even 30 or 35% of their income. So, but the only way that people are going to be from downsize from 2 cars household to 1 car is if you have public transit, if you have bikeability, if people can get to places. And for that, we need to have frequency. So, and sometimes it comes the chicken or the egg. People said, oh, we don't invest in more buses because the bus that we have now goes empty. Well, if you have a bus that goes every 2 hours and that is not frequent, that is not connected, people are not going to use it. So the chicken or the egg is very clear. First, you need to create a bus service that is connected and that is frequent and that is affordable. Once people realize that it's connected and frequent and affordable, then they're going to start using it. Same thing with riding bicycles. You need to create that safe place so that people will go from rural areas to visit friends or families or work or to go to the schools, but it has to be safe. And from the point of view of the hills, keep in mind of the e-bikes. The e-bikes are really, really amazing for areas like in the Appalachia region that you got beautiful mountains. But yes, sometimes it's a little bit too hilly for some people. Well, with the e-bike, you no longer have that issue. So we need to see how to improve that. Also, many governments are providing incentives for people to have e-cars. They should also provide incentives to have e-bikes. I mean, why give someone $10,000 to have an e-car and not give somebody at least 50% of the cost of the e-bike? But more than anything, it's about the infrastructure. And keep in mind, it doesn't make a lot of sense that 10-year-old, 12, 14, they depend on someone just to go out because they want to go out for an ice cream. No, a 14-year-old should be able to get on their bike or to take public transit and go to their movies and go visit friends. or go and just chat and have ice cream. So it's equally important in the rural area as well as in the urban area. From the point of view of equity, this is totally interwoven. Equity, public health, and economic development.
Hey, Gil, thank you so much. I really appreciate everything that you presented today and your work in general with 880's cities. We do need now to transition to our next panelist, or keynote speaker, excuse me, Robin Hutchinson. She is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Safety Policy for the U.S. Department of Transportation. Robin, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's such a pleasure to be here, Mike. Thanks for having me. And I just want to thank all the organizers. It is an honor to be presenting alongside the very famous Gil Peñalosa. So really great to be here. And I very much enjoyed that presentation. My job at the U.S. Department of Transportation is to really think about communities and to lift up safety as much as possible. I am a Deputy Assistant Secretary in the policy shop in the Office of the Secretary. And I can tell you that Secretary Buttigieg is committed to safety, accessibility, and mobility in rural, suburban, and urban communities across the United States. I'm going to talk for just a little bit today to give you a sense of, from the US federal government, how are we thinking about our best ways to support Americans, older Americans, and everybody's quest for better accessibility, health, and livability. I am going to focus on safety as it is foundational to everything else that we want to do on our streets and roadways and in our transportation network. So I'm going to try and share my screen. I'm really not great at technology, which has been a challenge for me and I'm sure everybody else for the last 18 months. So I would like you to please tell me, someone, or like give me a heads up. Mike, maybe you can give me a heads up if you can see my screen.
Yep, we got it.
What is it that you can see?
We see we don't see it in presentation mode, but we see the main slide and then the slides to the left of it, which could work if you can't put it in. Yeah, you can do it.
I'm just going to assume that we have a patient audience today while I work this out. I think I got it.
You got it.
We got it?
Yay.
That's great. I'll continue on now. Thank you so much for your patience out there in the digital world. Every presentation I do really starts with the Biden-Harris administration priorities because they are priorities that support communities of all sizes. COVID recovery, building back better with every tool we have. Investing in clean energy, supporting job growth, and ensuring access for everyone, people of color, also those with disabilities, 1 in 10 Americans, really ensuring access for all. We're doing our work by these principles. And to these principles, we also add our secretarial principles, which are one and the same. But adding to that is the mission of the U.S. Department of Transportation to ensure that we have the safest and most efficient modern transportation system in the world. I mentioned this earlier. Safety is really foundational to so many of our goals. When we build on a foundation of safe streets and roadways, we're able to reach goals of climate and equity, and we're able to support numerous health and livability objectives that we know local governments, regional governments have across the country. So I'm going to start today with a few minutes on a pretty big problem with roadway safety. And this is kind of aggregate level. It's going to dovetail nicely with the last presentation. These are things we know in aggregate about our problem. It's going to be a little bit of a downer, but then we're going to end high, I promise. We have even updated numbers here than what you're seeing here. We're disappointed that the trends are not reversing, they're actually getting worse. And in fact, this year, we've got an 18% projected increase in the number of deaths on our roadways in the United States. This is unacceptable. Secretary Buttigieg recently called this crisis, and we have to do everything in our power and in partnership with others to reverse it. We had some success over 30 years. There were a number of technological improvements that helped to bring the curve down, but unfortunately, we've stalled and we're not making the same progress that we really should be. And from the perspective of disproportionate impacts, we're going in the wrong direction. So we're seeing increases in so many different categories. And in particular, we are looking very closely at disproportionate impacts. And we're seeing that fatalities are impacting different communities differently. And we're seeing that most intensely for people of color, American Indian being the highest level of disproportionality. And then also for victims who are not in a vehicle, who are walking, riding a bike, rolling a wheelchair. These are problems that we're going to be focusing on because this is where we're seeing the most disproportionality of death and serious injury in our network. Just another way to look at it. So we also want to look at rural and urban data. And, we see that rural roads have disproportionate number of crashes and serious injuries as well. And I think that the fatalities on rural roads is a really important marker to make sure that we're looking at the problems both from urban and suburban and rural perspectives. So I'm just highlighting here that our Secretary Buttigieg, has promised that we're going to make some plans. And we're going to say what we're going to be doing about it from the US government. It's a crisis, it's preventable, and he announced that we would be releasing a national roadway safety strategy in January. It has to be across the entire Department of Transportation, and it has to, and it will focus on a safe system approach, where we look at the users of the system, all of them, and all of their needs, safety of vehicles, reducing speeds. It says safe speeds, but I come from local government where we worked actively to reduce speed limits to save lives. We're going to talk about reducing speeds, safer roadways and roadway design, post-crash care. This is all a safe system approach, and all of these initiatives together, we think will make a big difference. No loss of life is acceptable. I do this for myself sometimes where I've done work in my career across multiple settings, rural, suburban, and urban. And most recently it's been quite urban, and I'm enjoying reconnecting with other parts of the country. And so I'm always careful to make sure that I've included and I talk about the rural challenges in addition to the urban challenges. And what we are finding is that the rural transportation networks there are really some unique challenges. There are a lot of lane miles, which means that whatever we do, we have to bring focus here. Urban travelers account for nearly half of vehicle miles on rural roadways. So it's carrying quite a load. And then fatality rates on rural roads are twice as high as on urban roads. I think speed's a factor here. And so our work to bring speeds down is going to be. Something else that we have collected some data on is accessibility for people living with disabilities. So there's about 40 million US adults that report at least one of 6 types of disabilities. And there's over 25 million Americans that have a travel limiting disability. I think these are challenges that we need to consider in both our safety strategies and how we're building more complete communities for everyone. And I think this is very relative to having a transportation network that really works for a broad range of all Americans, age, ability, and every category that would make a healthy community and society. So in our work, as bringing safety as a foundation here, we are aiming to ensure that there are transportation choices for people of all ages and abilities, that we have well-connected networks for walking, biking, rolling, and using transit, that we're building on opportunities and innovations, such as on-demand rideshare and micromobility, that we're fostering communities that are safer and more economically vibrant and accessible, promoting physical activity and health, and reducing vehicle emissions and fuel use. This is a kind of a nice checklist for a healthy community in any community and the way that transportation can really support these goals. So can't do any presentation without talking about the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. It's a tremendous generational opportunity to make investments in all of our communities in transportation, and with a focus on all of those goals that I just reviewed. And I want to start first by saying that this is a huge investment in rethinking how our transportation network, particularly safety on our streets, supports communities. So this bipartisan infrastructure law doubles funding for state and local safety efforts with $13 billion, an increase of $13 billion for specific measures to reduce crashes and fatalities. When we're working with communities to reduce crashes and fatalities, we're also making streets that work for people and that become places. So first, there's a $6 billion program. It's called Safe Streets for All, focusing on vulnerable roadway users. This will be for local government specifically to plan for and construct better streets for all people. There's about $3 billion added to the state highway safety improvement program, I should say. And this is for statewide improvements. This is on top of already about $11 billion. This is an increase that will help states address the biggest safety issues that they are seeing. And then an additional $4 billion for the way we collect data and vehicle safety programs, including truck safety, which is an issue in really every community. One other point about Safe Streets for All is that it is part of a broader effort to protect vulnerable roadway users, including pedestrians and bicyclists. And just a side note, there's some legislation, and if you just look to the bottom of the screen, that says that if vulnerable users make up 15% or more of statewide fatalities in a year, state officials must spend 15% of safety funds to address the problem. That's new. That really encourages states to invest in safety for vulnerable users. And that's not all. there are so many ways that our transportation network is going to be supported by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. High-speed internet actually removes trips from the network and connects all of America. There's $1 billion to reconnect communities that were divided by transportation infrastructure. There's a great investment in roads and bridges and their condition, modernizing public transit, and also improving freight rail. I see that I have been joined on the screen, and I believe that is my cue to begin wrapping up. Just a nod to rural areas again, knowing that I'm speaking to an audience that is urban, suburban, and rural, many different kinds of cities and towns. Just want to highlight the Routes Initiative, which is the rural opportunities to support transportation and economic success. And we have a one-stop shop for rural transportation resources, a toolkit that can be accessed to find money and ways to access money. And just a really sort of bespoke technical assistance for our rural stakeholders. So with that, I'll recap a little bit here, who I am, and recap by saying safety is foundational to creating great livable communities for an all ages approach to having healthy, vibrant communities, that we're investing in safety, both in how we make a statement in January in National Roadway Safety Strategy, and putting our money where our mouth is through the resources in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. I know this is going to make a difference. It's going to make a difference for all Americans, and it's going to make a difference for older Americans who have unique challenges that will hopefully be addressed by these investments in our streets and in our transportation network. I want to thank you for having me today. That is the close of my presentation. And once again, thank you so much for inviting me to join you. I hope this was helpful.
Thank you, Robin. That was great. We appreciate your time and the information you provided. We've had quite a start to our program today with you and Gil. And I'm going to issue a quick apology. I'm Alan Briggs with the North Carolina AARP. I want to apologize in advance to our panelists. We have quite a lineup of people that we all wanted to include in this program. All of them have more than 5 minutes they can contribute to this discussion and informing our audience. So thank you for being willing to come with us and for being brief today. And we will try to have some time at the end for question and answers. So put those into the chat and we will proceed with my neighbor down the road, Mayor Brenda Lyerly from Banner Elk, North Carolina. She has been mayor there for many years and recently received an award from our area Council of Governments for her work on rural transportation. So thank you for coming and sharing your insights and experience. Welcome, Mayor Lyerly.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I enjoyed both of the presentations. They were very insightful. And it is, from the town of Banner Elk perspective, we are a tourist area. So we definitely have emphasized the walking and biking trails because we're such an outdoor area to all of those who come to our area. Then I will put on my rural transportation hat and talk about the bigger area, the county and our 7-county area, which is extremely rural, lots of people over 65, many people that are economically challenged, and we don't have the luxury of having trolleys and city buses and those kind of things, and lots of rural area. So what we've done is we've made sure that we do the humane thing and look after all of our citizens. And we have a van service that takes people to their doctor's offices, to the grocery store when needed, and make sure that their quality of life is good as well.
That's great. you mentioned the trails, and those of you who are watching from North Carolina should be aware that our state budget this year has appropriated the most money in probably our lifetime for trails, greenways, and alternative transportation. Can you talk a little about how you're planning to look at that and use that both locally and regionally?
Well, I'm also on the board of the High Country Council of Governments in North Carolina. We have a Council of Governments regionally all over in our 7-county area. That Council of Governments works with us to assist in how we do the entire region with that. And they help us with grants. They help us with the monies that we can receive. And we work with the DOT to make sure that we use it for all accesses and safety.
And you mentioned specifically, we talked in our broadband series about telehealth. And would you mention a little more about the transportation support for medical appointments and services?
Well, that is through our AAA too, the Area Aging Agency works really closely with these people to make sure that all of this happens. There are lots of agencies in our area that look after the people that we need to help. So that they work with that very carefully.
Well, I think you've given us a good example of the importance of collaborating regionally, and I hope you'll stay with us a little bit, because as I say, I hope we'll have some time at the end for some questions and answers, and I think others from very rural parts of their states will probably have some questions for you. Thanks again.
Sure, thank you.
Next up on our lineup for our panel will be our friends Regina Sayers and Joe Ratcliffe from the Appalachian Agency for Seniors Center. Our Virginia friends have also helped us with our program planning. They're going to talk about a program they've initiated, and we do have the segue, I think, to the medical transportation issue. So, Joe, Regina, welcome.
Thank you. I had to unmute. Joe, I'll let you go first once you're unmuted.
I think Joe's still muted too.
Sorry about that.
There you go.
I'm going to talk briefly about our service area. We serve a 4-county area in Southwest Virginia. If you could go to the next slide, please, and stay with that. It's a very rural area, approximately 1,800 square miles. Our area had no transportation services, no public transit, no taxis. People were dependent on their family or friends or their church for transportation. We saw the need, and what we did was we partnered with our local governments and the state, and we established our own public transit system. We wanted to make sure that it was inclusive and age-friendly. So all of our routes go through the major housing areas, and they travel to the life needs such as grocery stores and hospitals and medical facilities. And an important point is all of our routes, or the majority of them, connect. They have transfer points, so you can transfer from route to route and travel throughout the county or into the next county if you wish, which is important for our area because some residents have to travel to other counties to access even a Walmart. Our system is age-friendly. Obviously, we're an area agency on aging, so we wanted our system to be age-friendly. So our routes include senior housing and senior centers in the area. We go into the senior centers and we do training on how to use public transit, how to use our system, make sure our schedules are available to them. And we also do training with our drivers. Now, obviously, we do safety training and typical public transit training with our drivers, but we also train them on how to interact with older riders. We train our drivers on the services that our agency provides, and our drivers carry a card with the contact information for our main agency. If they see a need or hear a need on the bus, they can hand the card to the rider. The rider can call that number to a referral office here in our agency, and they will interview them and connect them with the services that they need. We have grown over the years. If you could go to the next slide, please. As our service has grown and our funding has increased, we were able to build our own transit facility or our maintenance facility. We do 98% of our maintenance in-house, which is a great cost savings for us, so we can put that money into services. Our buses, we operate what's called body on chassis buses. They're typically 14 to 19 passenger. They all have bike racks and they're all handicap accessible. There's a picture there of our veterans van, and then a picture of some folks getting on a bus at one of our stops. And if we could go to the next slide, that leads me into, I want to talk about the age of our riders. If you'll look at the slide, this is a survey of our ridership. 45% of our riders are over 50. Which I feel shows that we're age friendly and we encourage older citizens to ride. But I would also like to point out that over 36% of our riders are between 25 and 49 years old. And I think that shows that we're a true public transit that is inclusive. We serve everyone and we still focus on our older riders. If you could go to the next slide, please. This is one of our riders. She wrote a couple of comments on her last survey. Obviously, we like to see the one where she says she rides the bus 3 days a week and that we meet her need to get out and get groceries and to her life needs. But the quote I found really interesting, and it's something we've noticed. She put, "I like to get out and socialize and to see my good friends." A lot of our older riders communicate with each other and they go out on the same day at the same time, and they're turning riding the bus into a social event to go to the grocery store, to go somewhere and eat. So that we're really proud of that it gives them social interaction also. I see that my time is running out, so I'm going to turn this over to Regina, who is the executive director of our total agency. Regina.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning. I'm Regina Sayers, Executive Director for Appalachian Agency. I'm going to discuss our non-emergency medical transportation pilot project. We all know that enhancing health through transportation is important to improve the social determinants of health, especially in rural communities. We have sometimes had Medicaid taxis dispatched from the Richmond area, which is a 6-hour drive, to our service area to provide trips, non-emergency medical trips. So besides the Medicaid taxis, we are very limited on other viable options for medical transportation. Our non-emergency medical transportation pilot program was funded by the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center. It began in mid-December of 2020 and ran through the end of May 2021. We called it the Road to Better Health, and it really started with the unmet needs of our older adults. After 7 months of logging data, an average of 32% of the calls that we received were for medical transportation. When the 6-month pilot program was completed, 227 requests for rides were received, 975 trips were provided, 107 riders were transported for dialysis, cancer treatment, chemo treatments, surgery, follow-up appointments, COVID vaccines, colonoscopies, surgeries, orthopedic services, and other medical appointments. The AEP Foundation did provide additional funding to continue this much needed service that benefits our clients from not having to worry about getting to their medical appointments. And these results of improved health and well-being are now being enjoyed by those riders. Unfortunately, the funding from AEP has been depleted as of this month, and we are in the process of seeking additional funding along with community partnerships to sustain this vital program. But providing non-emergency medical transportation can help to reduce the cost of a caregiver absenteeism from work, which comes at a cost of anywhere from 17 to 33 billion dollars per year in lost productivity. It reduces hospital readmission rates and relieves anxiety for the caregiver, improving their mental health. So funding for non-emergency medical transportation is as vital for economic development as it is to improve the health outcomes in our rural communities. Thank you.
That's great, Regina. I think you're going to be a contender for the Jerry Maguire Award because people are going to want you to show us the money. So if you don't mind adding in that chat the source of your foundation grant, I think folks particularly in rural communities, we're always looking for those additional funding sources to help us grow and expand the services we can offer. Thank you both. That's
you.
really great. Appreciate having you today.
Thank
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And we're going to move down the road and invite on Michelle Watkins, who's with the Rockbridge Area Transportation System. I guess if we're giving awards, we'll consider offering one to them for their acronym, RATS. I'm sure everyone in the area has probably had fun with that. So Michelle, please join us, and we look forward to hearing from you as well now.
Thank you and good morning. I apologize for the casual attire. It's Casual Friday. But RAT, ironically, Regina, that was an excellent segue into our organization. We were founded in 1995 by a woman named Joan Manley, who herself had been paralyzed in a car accident. And our organization began at her kitchen counter as she was trying to find volunteers to be able to help drive people who were mobility challenged to their medical appointments. Very simple, but very difficult to do. And over the course of the years with the volunteers, it ultimately evolved into a financial business and reaching out to not only now those people who are mobility challenged, who are developmentally challenged, economically challenged, senior citizens, and retirees. So we've really been able to expand our services, and yet we still keep running into the financial challenges. Being in a rural area, we don't have taxis, we don't have buses, we don't have Lyft or Uber or anything like that. So we're really very limited unless you have a friend or a family beyond our services and or private transportation services who definitely will try to come into these rural areas, but they can't make it very long because the cost is so high for them. During the pandemic, as we all know, a lot of people were moved from independent settings into assisted living facilities or group places of residence, which ironically also included the founder of our organization, Joan. And we ran into the challenge where suddenly she had to be moved onto a stretcher and we were no longer able to transport her. We didn't have the funding, we didn't have the resources, so we couldn't take her to a simple outpatient medical appointment, despite being a non-emergent medical transport organization that we are. So needless to say, over dinner one evening with a friend of mine, who's the academic vice president for a community college, he and I were brainstorming over a couple glasses of Pinot Noir about how do we handle this type of situation? Where are the resources that we need? We should be able to help people right here in our own community so that the private for-profit service providers from Kentucky, for example, don't have to drive 3 hours each direction simply to take her to a doctor appointment. And ironically, he said, well, that's really interesting because we have a patient transport vehicle at our campus. We have an EMT training program at our campus. And I said, well, I've got the credentialed drivers, the billable services, and community members in need. Let's put it together. And we were able to receive a grant from United Way Rockbridge to help fund jump-starting this program. The vehicle is in the shop right now being primed for this service opportunity. It is our hope and goal to be operating in this capacity within the next 60 to 90 days. And that Joan, the founder of our organization, will be the first person we are able to transport this way. So trying to take a negative situation and turning it into a positive development for our community really has inspired a lot of our other agencies and organizations in our rural area to try to work together. We are working with our hospice program. We just applied for a grant together to see about being able to transport people from hospice. Again, a private transportation company was supposed to pick up somebody at hospice at 10 a.m. to take them home. And they arrived at 7 p.m. 9 hours can be a matter of life or death for somebody in hospice. You can't take that chance. So we're working very closely with hospice, with hospitals. We've had a hospital in a neighboring county sign a contract with us to be able to go up and start transporting people to and from chemo, radiation. Right now, it may be ambulatory and by wheelchair, but also with the capacity ultimately of being able to transport stretchers. This is something that we definitely need in our area. You know, being as rural as we are, we tend to be an afterthought. And yet our needs are just as strong as the city areas. So we're getting heard, and we're happy about that because it's allowing us to be able to help more people. Another challenge we run into is transporting students between community college campuses. A lot of kids don't have vehicles. They can't get between their classes, so they leave the rural area to go to the city area. Then we're losing the workforce that we need to support our community, which is mostly retirees. So it really does kind of roll all together. One thing I would like to mention that is kind of a goal with all of the work that we're trying to do to develop these resources, we think there should also be a reward. And so some vineyards and breweries have actually reached out to us about being able to provide safe driving for people. Again, it supports the economy. And one of our goals is to be able to take funding through that resource ultimately and put it back into the community where we're able to go out and provide transportation services for people in the outlying rural areas, which is even more rural than where I'm at right now. You know, people who can't get to the grocery store, people who can't get to see family and friends, that we can go out into those areas. We can get more people to work. We can further develop our local workforce in the 20 to 50-year-old range that we're otherwise losing, because now we can get them into the city area for work. We can get them with their family and friends. It helps the economy. It helps the whole community. So those are just some of the projects we're working on. I can also say, as Vice Chair of Social Services here for Rockbridge County, we're definitely trying to look at how we can support families in need, making sure that they're getting to services and appointments as needed. Again, building the young into a more solid future.
That's really great. In fact, I'm very intrigued because I was going to ask you if you had private interests and entities that were engaging with you, and you've given a couple of great examples. Probably a lot of us perked up when you talked about trips to the brewery, right?
I figured it would. It usually does. And some employers are also trying to pitch in and what they can contribute on. As I tell them, the larger their contribution on a monthly basis, the larger their name will be on the magnets that we'll put on our vehicles to say thank you. And that makes it a win-win because it's marketing for the organization as much as it is bringing in revenue for our community.
And it ties in with what Joe was talking about, an opportunity to socialize. So that's great. Thank you, Michelle. Now it's a great pleasure of mine to introduce former mayor of Chattanooga, Tennessee, Ron Littlefield. I had the pleasure of working with Ron years ago when he was mayor. During the rapid expansion of your public transit system, your greenways and bike trail system. And from that time forward, you face that challenge of, as we go to alternative and multimodal forms of transportation, how did you deal with increased public transit, pedestrian traffic, bike traffic, and so on? So, Mr. Mayor, I'm pleased to see you and welcome.
Great to be with you, even virtually. I said when I was invited to this, I look forward to being in Asheville. And they said, no, virtual. I said, oh, rats. Okay, I'll do it anyway.
That's all right. We're going to come to Chattanooga.
Well, I understand you're coming, and I'll mention that just briefly because I know time is of the essence right now. So I will try to compress my usual comments into a 3 to 5 minute elevator pitch, if you will. I've been sitting here feverishly taking notes with what the speakers were referring to, and I want to respond to some of those things, if you might, as just the way of making my presentation. We're very proud of Chattanooga, and we've told the story all over the world, really, that we believe that Chattanooga is honestly the most transformed city in America, if not one of the most transformed cities in the world. And people who can remember back to October of 1969, people with hair like mine, might remember Walter Cronkite, who was an internationally known newscaster. And one night on his news program, he told the world that the most polluted city in America was Chattanooga, Tennessee. And he had a map behind him. I remember it very well. And it was not a Chamber of Commerce moment for our community, but we have worked from that start to transform our community. And we think we're a model for others to follow. Our air, our water, we were an industrial city in the South, which was an anomaly. Most cities in the South were like Atlanta, Charlotte, and others were marketing oriented or agriculturally oriented, and we were heavy industry. I mean, old smoky, iron smelting, things of that nature, which contributed to a poor environment. But in the 1970s, we began to build trails. I'm a city planner by background. That's why I have that AICP thing on the back wall there. Many planners might recognize that. But we began to encourage the local community to let's build trails other than roads. And we had opportunities like we built a levee system to protect some of the areas that were flooding and managed to build a trail on top of that. And I remember very well one of the local elected officials saying quite openly and shamelessly, why would anyone want to walk when they can drive in a car? So we've come a long way in Chattanooga. In the 1980s, we built one of the first electric battery powered shuttles systems in the country. Actually had a company here building the buses for us, and those buses were exported all over the world for a time. They were large batteries. They wouldn't meet today's technology. It wouldn't surprise anyone, but they worked very well. And we did that because we didn't want to contribute to downtown pollution. And they're still running. They're free, a shuttle, get you from one end of our rather lengthy downtown to the other in quick fashion. Then we began to build bike lanes and bike facilities. It took some years, but we were one of the first cities in the country to have those rental bike stations that you see now. I remember, I think it was when my first term as mayor, we put some of the first ones in, and Chicago was one of the only other cities that had the same sorts of facilities. And I asked someone, would it be possible to rent a bicycle in Chattanooga and ride it to Chicago and check it in up there? And they said they really didn't think that would work. But Chicago and Chattanooga were on the leading edge of bicycle facilities when other people really weren't believers in such things. Now, Gil had some pictures, which I chuckled here, when he had those pictures of sidewalks with poles in the middle of the sidewalks with improper curb cuts and things of that nature. I have in all of my photo library similar types of well-meaning mistakes, I call them, when people were building those facilities and think this will work very well until you see they don't work well for everybody, particularly people in wheelchairs. We have them not only in our urban area. I have one down in a rural area where a piece of a sidewalk at an intersection was built with wheelchair ramps on both sides and no sidewalk in either direction. So you could ramp yourself up, sit on that sidewalk briefly, and go absolutely nowhere. So people are still making those kind of mistakes. We still make those kind of mistakes. Shouldn't be discouraged about it because it's all a work in progress, but we try not to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. We started inner city visits back in the 1980s, and we took people to Baltimore and Boston and Charlotte, North Carolina, as a matter of fact, one of the early cities that we visited. And now I know we have people coming from Asheville and other communities this very year to look at Chattanooga and see how things that we have done might be applied in their community. That's shamelessly stealing ideas. We stole the aquarium idea from Baltimore and Boston. I have a whole list of things that we've stolen from other communities, ideas usually, but I had the mayor of Atlanta here one time, Shirley Franklin, and I pointed out that while we stole ideas from other cities, we stole the actual carousel in our downtown park from the city of Atlanta. It wasn't quite that dramatic. We bought it from a person who had salvaged it. But stealing ideas is how communities move themselves forward one step at a time. Now, Robin Hutchison of USDOT talked about safety and facilities and so forth. And I am old enough to remember when we've gone from colored pins in a big wall map to indicate where accidents had happened and the severity of accidents, whether or not it was pedestrians or bicycles or buses and trucks and so forth, to technology. And Chattanooga now has sensors and cameras, and we have one of the only gig economies having installed fiber optics in our community, which is another subject for another whole presentation. But we have capabilities in telemedicine and other present day needs that are unmatched in other communities.
Mayor, I'm going to ask you if you'll pause, and I know that you will hang around because I think there are several questions that are going to come up on the safety issue that you were addressing. And you've done a great job too of reminding us, as Gil set the stage initially, about how interconnected all of these different issues are: economic development, broadband access, transportation, and so on. But I want to be sure that we give time to Tristan Winkler with the Land of the Sky Regional Council. Go ahead.
Go right ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tristan, welcome. And I know you're working on some of the trails that we were talking about. So if you would explain what the French Broad River MPO is and what you're up to.
Sure. So let me share my screen really quickly. Can you all see that?
Yes, thank you.
All right. So I'm Tristan Winkler. I'm the director of the French Broad River MPO at the Land of Sky Regional Council. For those of you who aren't aware of MPOs or metropolitan planning organizations, we are federally mandated transportation planning organizations that generally cover urbanized areas as well as other areas that are anticipated to urbanize or are in otherwise economically intertwined with the urbanized area. So today I was going to give just a brief overview of thinking regionally for bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. I think what we're talking about today is what's happening in our region, but I think a lot of that is addressing trends that are happening in other places as well. So just really quickly, big regional trends. Our region is growing. By 2045, we're anticipating about 190,000 new residents, or in other words, another 2 Asheville's being added to our region. That's a lot of growth, and accommodating that is going to be something that's going to come with challenges. It's something we hear a lot when it comes to development pressures, is how does transportation get accommodated? Another big trend is that our region is getting more regional. When we look at all the different data we have in terms of commuting, we see that fewer and fewer people are staying within the same county area for living and for work. And this is something that is also a nationwide trend. And just to point out, this is just commute data. This doesn't account for other trips, such as going to medical facilities, or in our region, especially going to outdoor recreation areas, which is one of the big draws of this area. Another thing to point out is that our region is also getting more extra regional. And by that, I mean that the telecommuting boom that we've seen recently, as well as since the beginning of the pandemic, our region has been a hotspot for that. So even back in 2018, before the pandemic, the Asheville metro area was number 6 in the nation for people working from home, most of which are telecommuters. The thing to point out, or I'd point out from the top 6 telecommuting areas, is that they are, a lot of those places are places that are known for their outdoor amenities. And finally, bike ped crashes and fatalities in our region are increasing. We've seen that virtually year over year. The trends are pretty clear. Pedestrian crashes have, on average, nearly doubled over the last 20 years. Bicycle crashes, roughly the same. And pedestrian fatalities in 2020, we had our worst year in the region. We had 14 fatalities. That made up 25% of the roadway fatalities in our region. That's also a record for us. Just to point out, these types of crashes are not centered in our urban areas. They are spread out around the region. Another thing to point out is that, like a lot of things, there's multiple layers of equity when we're talking about addressing issues with people traveling without a car. And again, this is a trend that's not just our region. This is something happening nationally that a couple of other presenters have touched on, and is an area that increasingly needs more focus in the transportation world. So another thing is that our region is getting more interested and invested in bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. 21 of our 26 jurisdictions in the region have completed or have ongoing bicycle and pedestrian plans. And we hear a lot from our surveys as well as others, I believe some at the area's Chamber of Commerce, that have heard a lot that getting more safer bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure is a priority. But something to point out there is that implementation is generally a local government responsibility in North Carolina. I know my time's short. So what are we doing to help address some of these issues? In our region, we're focusing a lot of our resources towards the need. Our organization receives about $4.5 million a year in federal transportation funds. And as of right now, about 95% of those funds have been going towards bicycle and pedestrian projects. It is not nearly enough money to address the need, but it is a step in the right direction. And I will say that is something that all the credit for that is due to our local governments, because more and more we hear this as a major priority of getting more resources towards these types of projects. Also, for our organization, building a regional vision. So we worked with our local governments and stakeholders on putting together a regional trail plan that we call the Hellbender Trail. It's a proposed 150+ mile trail network based on local plans. It would have 112,000 residents within a half mile of the trail network. And for us, this goes back to the idea of we increasingly need to think about how we connect different parts of our region. And as of right now, we know that connectivity in the bike ped realm in our region is not great. So we hope that this is an initiative that will help push that forward. Also, balancing access and speed. We've identified areas where walking and biking trips are more likely to happen. And so in those areas, we are recommending reduced vehicular level of service, more bike ped accommodations, and lower speeds in those areas. Trying to implement some of that, we are moving forward with some studies looking at arterials and how we can change the way those roads work in order to better accommodate other modes and help safety for all modes.
Tristan, if you will, I'm sorry to cut you off here, but we are running shy. We have a number of questions. Please, folks, you see the great planning that's going on, and I think Tristan's contact information is up there, and I encourage you to follow back up with him to explore these, all the directions that he's tackling. It's pretty impressive, and I wish you well. At this point, we do have a number of questions, so if you'll hang around with the rest of us, I want to thank all of our panelists, and I'm glad I apologized at the outset because there's so much to cover and so much you have to share, and we appreciate your time, and sorry to keep you so short, but I'm going to hand it back now to Mike to answer those questions that have been posted both in the Q&A and chat, and if you have others, please feel free to add them to that. And I know that one of the first questions that had come up was for Robin, and I don't know if anyone can address how soon some of these federal funds are available, but Mike, thank you, and we'll give it back to you for the Q&A.
Thank you very much. This is going to be such a rapid round. So many great presentations. One of the questions that came up that was started with Ted Silver, and this is sort of what I frame as the lip service to legislation question, where we have a lot of money as potential, as Robin pointed out, from new federal legislation in the transportation bill. And we have municipalities and counties who are starving for these funds to advance active transportation and dignity in transportation. And then yet we get to the state and things get so mired up to get the funds from the feds to the local municipalities and regions. And so how do we really move our elected leaders forward to make sure that they are making the robust investment in active transportation that we so desperately need? And I'll just throw that out to anyone who wants to respond.
Well, among my many duties as a planner growing up in Chattanooga was being a grantsman at one time. And it's simply a matter of looking at what is available. I mean, it's just like a budget for your home. I was looking at the list of options for the new funding that's coming down with the legislation that is brand new on our screen. And I could see things there that if we look at the list of needs in our community and give them a priority, we can apply those funds which were previously unavailable to get things done. So I think it's just a matter of being creative, looking at the list and saying, what is our community facing and how can we not bend these things to our needs, but interpret our needs in a way that they fit these funding categories. It's a simple process, really. It just requires some creative thought.
Mike, I would also like to compliment that I agree with the former mayor, it's an attitude. And we need to pressure the municipalities to request the money, to find the ways how to get it. And we need to advocate. The US has never had, I think in the last 100 years, as such an opportunity of a Secretary of Transportation that is totally aligned with active transportation. Also, even COVID must have shown that we need to live healthier lives, healthier lifestyles. And for example, the public transit is not only for older adults that have disabilities. Okay, that's fine to have that, but we need public transit for everybody with or without disabilities. And from the point of view of walking and cycling, the infrastructure is very inexpensive, very inexpensive. So to have safe crosswalks, that is not gonna break the bank. But we need to decide, are we gonna continue putting all of the transportation money into infrastructure for cars? Or are we also gonna put a substantial amount for walking and cycling? So safe crosswalks, protected bikeways, connecting the trails. When you look at that, compared with the budget that goes into the roads for cars, it's a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction. So I think it's about of having the proper proportion and having the attitude to just get it done.
I have a follow-up question to that, and that's again for all the panelists. Thank you, Gil. Tristan pointed out cycling and bicycle fatalities have increased almost twofold. And certainly, Robin Hutchinson pointed out the public health crisis we have in transportation, the inhumane conditions. And we all often talk about investment in infrastructure. And I'm wondering if there is an education component to this as well. And my question is, are the professional transportation engineers who built the inhospitable environment to people, are they the best equipped to solve this problem? Or do we need a new type of transportation engineer, new types of transportational professionals to get us out of this public health crisis that we're in? All right, no one wants to take a crack at that one. So the other question I mean, I think that is a big question mark.
No,
Here-
Mike, I'm sorry. I was leaving so that I'm not the only one answering, but I don't think it's just an issue of public transport or transportation engineers. We're talking about mental health, physical health. We are talking about climate change. So these decisions should not be just a decision of the engineers. We need to engage. It's just as valid the word of the engineer as the word of the chief health officer, as well as people from climate change and people from tourism and people from multiple. So then the engineers do. One of the problems is that the transportation engineers for many, many years, they were just being taught at the university, cars. So they never looked at anything else. Also now, of course, there are many new transportation engineers with an open mind that they want to do something better. But even then, these decisions should not be up to them. Because in many cases, for example, the width of the lanes, the regulation says, okay, you can do it between 10 and 15 feet. And then the transportation engineer, just to be on the safe side, goes for the maximum. And then you say, why are those lanes so wide? And then she said, oh, because that's what the manual says. No, the manual didn't say 15, it said between 10 and 15. If you do it 10, all of a sudden you have space to have the protected bikeways on the side. All of a sudden you are gonna have cars going slower because when the lanes are very wide, it's an invitation to go very fast. When the lanes are narrower, then the cars go slower. So this is not the mode of mobility is not an engineer, is not a decision for the engineers. There should be just one of the many voices that should go into deciding how do people in the Appalachia region want to live? How do they want to move? For example,
thank you so much,
education.
Gil. I really appreciate that. I hate to interrupt you because I listened to you all day, but I was told that we are going over time, and unfortunately, it is time to wrap this up. This is just a conversation starter. Obviously, it's very clear and present that we have a lot of work to do in our region to provide humane conditions for mobility for one another. And I want to thank all of our panelists and our keynote speakers, and certainly AARP for facilitating this wonderful discussion today. Thank you all very much.